So I'm really excited to get into a really big topic today. It'll probably be a little bit of a lengthier video just because there's so much content here. So we're going to go over which type of deadlift should my client be doing. Again, my name is Dr. Chad Kuntz, sports physical therapist, and want to continue to help trainers, fitness professionals provide better and better education really to their clients out there. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start. Let me pull up a few pictures here because what I want to get into is how ridiculously important it is to teach a proper hip hinge, okay? All right, so here we have 4 ways that you guys can start to teach your clients how to properly hip hinge. Remember, you really can't do a proper deadlift if you can't do a hip hinge. So over here on the left, or on the, at least on my screen, the kneeling hip hinge. So the benefits about a kneeling hip hinge is that it's going to be more hip dominant because people can't cheat through their knees or through their ankles. And for that reason, I think this one's often underutilized. It tends to get a little bit more core involvement and is just really one of my favorites. So try that one, especially if they're struggling with some of these other ones, but keep that one in mind. Another way to do it is nice because you get some proprioceptive feedback to your client. I want to point out, of course, I'm demonstrating a good version here, but look at how straight my spine is. All right, so start with about 8 inches away from the wall. I kind of have them just pretend like they're reaching down towards the bar, as shown there with the wall hip hinge. But somewhere around 8 inches to a foot out away from the wall, and then slowly have them bring their butt back and just kind of touch the wall. So that's a really another nice variation. The standing bow, functional as well. I tend to find that this can be slightly progressed with a slight weight that they could hold in their chest, so they could hold on to like a 5-pound or a 10-pound. And for my group fitness class instructors out there, this can be a good one as well. Whether it's a warm-up or even part of the exercise, you can usually kind of walk around as people are doing them. But it is a challenging thing for people to get a hip hinge down correctly. At least that's in my experience. And then one that I really like is the bow with feedback. So you're taking a pole, a broomstick, PVC pipe, putting along the back of their spine. And there should be 3 points of contact there. The first one should be the back of the head. The second one should be the middle of the spine. And maybe this most important one for the third one is the lower back. They should have contact points on all 3 of those. Really, any of these you could utilize a PVC pipe. It's also very powerful in combination with the kneeling hip hinge, because usually in my experience people will start curling their spine, and they should feel that the PVC pipe is no longer in contact with that. All right, so I'm going to start clearing these out, and we're going to get into a few of the different options for which type of deadlift is best for your clients. So let's start into more of a traditional setting. So here's more of just an example of a traditional barbell deadlift. My next video, I'm going to get a little more specific with grips and types and stuff like that. But one point I want to make is right here, right before I take off, before your clients take off, they should be really locking and bracing and tensing through the core, getting into a nice low back, neutral to slight extension position before they drive up. Now, of note, like for me, it's a good example. I've got shorter arms, and so it almost feels like I get a little bit of rounding in my middle thoracic spine. I technically get probably more protraction through my shoulder blades. My shoulder blades separate apart from each other, and it's okay to get just a little rounding through the thoracic spine because of the nature of some level of protraction. But as I take off, my low back is rock solid. It's still, and that's really the main part that you should be observing, that people are really bracing, stabilizing before they pick up. And so when we say, fire your core, what does that really mean? In this case, it's more than just a TA draw where you're drawing your belly button back towards your spine. It should be a brace. You should be able to kind of fake that you're going to hit them through the lower back and the sides of the core, and they should be rock solid with that. All right, so I'm going to get into some other subtle variations of the deadlift here. So this is a sumo grip, guys, or excuse me, sumo stance with a narrow grip. I encourage you to kind of have fun and play around based upon their stance, based upon the height at which they start with the deadlift, and based upon the grip, whether that's wide, narrow, and then as you'll kind of see, I like the overhand grip. I like the overhand grip because as they pull up, if you're supinated like so, it tends to put a lot of anterior stress, in this case for me, on my right bicep. All right, so especially if I had like 4 or 5 on there or something, that would be a ton of stress on my bicep. Especially a lot of people don't have great form. They tend to flex through the bicep, which is even more potentially dangerous to injuring their bicep and their labrum and a lot of people. I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of people with pain in the front of the shoulder. I'd say 9 out of 10 times people have pain in the front of the shoulder, not necessarily the back, and so that would provoke something like that. This is a conventional style deadlift. To me, this is a person that has good mobility in their hips, in their thoracic spine. If you're doing sumo, it definitely takes some slack off the hips. They can kind of relax a little bit more. You can get, into the naturally open pack position of the hip. So flexion, abduction, and external rotation is the open pack position of the hip. So it's a little bit freer. So if you've got a tighter, stiffer person, I'm going to suggest what I just showed you there with a sumo grip, with a narrow, excuse me, a sumo stance with a narrow grip. But I like the overhands, as I'm showing right here, as I'm first taking off. This would probably be very appropriate. The conventional kind of tightens you up a little bit, and it'll expose deficits that you have from a functional perspective. I tend to find that this requires a little bit more calf flexibility too in that conventional grip. Now, I'm showing you here a snatch grip, all right, and I'm demonstrating where I'm hooking my thumbs underneath my fingers. This is more of a USA weightlifting type of stance, okay? I tend to find that this is a little bit more lat dominant when you go into a snatch grip, which to me feels good. The USA kind of guidelines would be, it's hard to demonstrate it here, but you're holding on to the barbell, and as your arms are out to your side, the barbell should be right at the waist. Okay, so that's appropriate. That's a pretty good position for me. So when my arms are widened out, that barbell goes right to my waist. So that's kind of my appropriate snatch position. But in general, I do find that snatch grips, or a little bit wider, tend to engage the lats a little bit more. So that's something you can play with too. What I wanted to show you here from this point of view is, again, that idea that I'm locking out. My spine is straight, particularly at the lower lumbar spine area. I'm bracing, and then I'm powering up after each rep. I'm sure you've seen those people in the gym, and hopefully not training them like that, but where they're just bouncing the weight up and down. It's uncontrolled. Every rep for me, I'm controlling, breathing in, bracing, powering up, slowly, if possible, coming down. I imagine a lot of you, I would say the majority of you, aren't training like huge power lifters. Most people just want to work out, burn fat, be healthy, build lean muscle. So if that's your type of client, then going through purposeful reps with good control, and particularly controlling on the way down, resetting and getting a good lift up after that is what you're looking for there. All right, so what I want to show you here is just the example using a barbell of how I'm really getting my hip back. All right, and sorry for the background noise here, but I'm really getting my hip back, okay? And that's really what I want your clients to keep working on. Most people don't get their hips back. They tend to arch through their lower back in their mind. to get the hips back, okay? Let's see if there's anything else I'm going to show you on that one. Oh yeah. So what I don't want to see, actually, this has been a fault. So a lot of people are extending their hips too early. They're kind of going through a posterior tilt. There's a lot of poorly shown Instagram influencers out there doing deadlifts, and I've seen a handful of my clients gather that notion. But as you can see with this rep right here, I curl my lower glutes too early, okay? So we want to make sure that as you're doing the deadlift, the point I want to make here is that you keep your lower spine kind of locked out. What I just did there is not a good rep. Let's see if I can go back and play that for you again. That right there, where I'm extending my hips too early, it creates a flexion moment in the lower lumbar spine. So you want to make sure to avoid that. All right. The next one I want to go through are deadlifts in a cable column, which might be a little bit more unconventional, maybe, or maybe some of you haven't tried this or thought about this one in a little while. But what I really like about this type of deadlift is, again, the lat engagement. I tend to find when people are having trouble and they're having low back pain, their lats, which the biggest muscle group in the upper body, they're not firing the way you want to. So yeah, the three benefits that, as I'm noting in the top left corner there, is that I get an increased lat drive. It's kind of fun because it's a unique angle of pull because it's pulling down and away for you. Okay, so it's a different slight angle. It's an accessory movement to your deadlifts. And for your clients that have had pain, look where my starting position is. So that straight bar is just below my knees. That's pretty high. That's almost analogous to like a rack pull, which is fantastic if they've been dealing with pain and maybe they're just slightly limited in the range of motion. So otherwise, it's the same hip hinge, guys. So that hip hinge is so important. Get the hips back. Look at the nice straight spine. I notice that when I have my clients do this, the straight bar is being pulled away at the bottom, and their hands are about 4 or 6 inches, or they lose complete tension on that straight bar at the bottom. So that's where you'll really feel great lat engagement. So if you notice someone struggling with back pain, they still want to work out, etc., I'd say this is a really good option for you to check out if you haven't tried that. Another classic option is with a kettlebell. So the con is that the weight's usually very light. So if you're talking about someone who could even do 135 pretty easily with a barbell, they're probably not your candidate. But if you're getting someone that just wants to start to learn how to do the hip hinge and you're just starting to teach them a little bit more about what that looks like, the kettlebell deadlift is a pretty good place to start. However, look at how far down I have to go. In fact, for me, as I get to that end range, I'm a little bit more far forwards than I want, which is actually good for my middle back, but it's not great for really cementing in the true hip hinge position that I want. So for me, oh yeah, I wanted to show you here. So that's what we don't want, and that's what we see a lot. This early hip hinge again, or excuse me, the early hip extension as you come up, it's poorly controlled. That right there, that's potential for low back pain. I just want you to see that real quick. But before I got into that, what I was going to say is that right here is probably about where I should be for my deadlift. Like that looks really good. That looks clean. My butt's back. But watch what it takes for me to get to that bottom. I have to kind of lean forwards. Looks good, looks good. And I start to lean forwards at the bottom. So I want you to kind of have that visual assessment as to what your client's deadlift should look like and being able to tell them, hey, I see you leaning forward at the bottom. Let's regress this. The other error that I see is people curling their spine. This is just a nightmare. I hope you don't ever witness me ever doing any type of deadlift like this, nor your clients. So again, make sure that you're setting the spine, and a good example of getting someone to start doing deadlifts after they're just starting to learn it would be a kettlebell deadlift, but I would have it elevated, on one of those steps. You could elevate those from the 4-inch step to 6 to 8 inches. So that'd be a really good place to start if someone's just learning the hip hinge. Maybe they've had, back pains and their history, and they're not quite sure, what their next step should be. Yet at the same time, they still want to work out. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, that's the kettlebell deadlifts. Along that idea are rack pulls. So there's a couple flips to the side of the coin here, that you could use and implement rack pulls. So for my power lifters and those who want to get really strong and work through the sticking point, rack pulls are a great way to do that because of just how high you can start with. That being said, this might be a nice progression from someone who just did the kettlebell deadlift. They're starting to feel a lot more confident with it. They ramped up to 50, 60 pounds. It was pretty easy. Yet maybe anatomically they're still limited in going into the full range of motion or traditional barbell deadlift. This would be a great time for them to practice rack pulls, okay, and really get some good strength out of it, good exercise regimen out of it. Another thing that I like with this is utilizing the elastic bands. So since you're working on a sticking point and at the top anyways, this is a lovely addition. There's varying degrees of resistance that you can buy with elastic bands. So I want to say this one was somewhere between 30 to 60 pounds, but it was a good load at the top. I mean, I would say, because I've got like 135 there, it felt probably closer to 225, just anecdotally at the top, is what I could probably tell you. So for your clients who are stiff, who still want a good strong workout, who are strong, but limited mobility, not quite there to go through the full range, don't forget about your rack pulls, and then play around with the elastic bands. You could just see how I kind of loop that around there, standing on it. And this is somewhat of a conventional stance, more so to kind of work with the band there. And then I got a slightly wider snatch-like grip. Okay, that's just one example there. Okay, so then we've got the Romanian barbell deadlifts. Those are a lot of fun too, and I like it because you can't really cheat as well as like a deadlift. For my people that are just bouncing like crazy, I'm going to get a Romanian barbell deadlift in their hand because you should be going about mid shin level, pausing, which is a great way to work on the sticking point as people come up, and you can even do pauses down there, which is really good stuff. Really good way to just teach them to brace through the core, stabilize, and then the drive up. So good front view here. Again, you can play with different grip positions. So I continue to suggest and advocate for an overhand grip. Slightly wider stance than conventional here, and pretty close to sumo. So in the case of that, someone with slightly stiffer hips wants a little bit more lat engagement. This might be a nice accessory movement or even solo deadlift type of style movement for them. I'm personally probably coming lower than you would need to go for a Romanian barbell deadlift because I'm going, looks like even past the mid shin. So you could probably stop, let's see, right about, even there would be a good place to stop if you really wanted to. Depends on your client and the mobility and how the form looks. So you can also do, I didn't show it here, but for more of your advanced clients, you could do a single leg stance, or maybe the back legs just contacting the ground lightly so that you could really focus on one leg. But you could still have two arms on that. Okay, so that way you could still get the lat engagement. If you wanted to focus on one arm, not shown here, you could kick one leg back, just toe touch the ground, and then really focus on one leg at a time. It's very hard. I'm not sure how many of your clients will be able to get there, but it is a very good variation. It teaches balance and stability and control too. Along that line of thought, we have the Romanian dumbbell deadlift. So kind of a similar idea here. With the dumbbells, you can have kind of a unilateral approach. So you can address one arm at a time, which is kind of nice. Incorporates a lot more grip strength and almost feels like a little bit more core work for me too. For whatever reason, I don't know about you, but I feel like I get a little more hamstring work out of this too. So there's another good hip hinge. You can see, as we talked earlier, I get a little thoracic flexion through the mid back, but I'm okay with that because look at my low spine. That looks rock solid. Now, of note, with the Romanian dumbbell deadlifts, look at how my hands are pointing in at the top, but watch how they rotate as they come down. I rotate, palms are facing now kind of towards me. There's a slight angulation so that the inner side of my wrist is actually angled towards my chin. So in the therapy world, we call that the scaption plane. It's one of the most safest positions, structurally sound for your shoulder, which is why I like to utilize that. And again, I'm just emphasizing that you got to get your butts back. So yeah, and as I've got listed there at the top left, I really like this to actually improve people's even hamstring length. You know, for people who have tight hamstrings, loading that in an eccentric manner can really improve overall hamstring length too, because sometimes our hamstrings are tight because they're weak at that end range too. So really good for grip, really good for core, reinforcing the hip hinge, the Romanian dumbbell deadlifts. Okay guys, so we talked about a lot there. It's a lot of rich, dense content. I didn't get too much into the single leg variations, although you could absolutely do that. I tend to find I spend a lot of time just working on a traditional deadlift, just working on that hip hinge, getting the core to fire the way we want to, and making sure they're not going to hurt themselves and they can just get a good overall workout too. So with any other questions, feel free to reach out, chadk@pr1memovement.com, and would love to continue to help you out with whatever specific problems you guys are facing as fitness professionals out there. So thank you so much. We'll talk to you guys soon. Take care.